We're very fortunate to have some very wonderful help today. And Melissa Ehrlich is our wonderful angel. And those of you who haven't met, is it Ehrlich or Ehrlich?
Either one.
Okay, wow. So Melissa is the membership director. Manager at RS, and she is helping us out tonight, and we're really happy to welcome you. And she gets to see us all in person. And I want to welcome everyone. So we have Ben Sion and Rachel and Eric, welcome back, and Eve. And we've already said hello to Muriel and Chip and Henry and Heshi, and maybe David will join us and maybe not, right? Okay, so we're all muted.
I don't know.
Okay.
What he does in Philadelphia, you know.
Oh, he's in Philly and you're in Florida.
Philly, I'm in Florida, right?
Okay, great.
He's teaching.
So, well, this is the magic of Zoom, that we can join each other even when we're not in the same place. So we will begin, as we always do, with our blessing for Torah study, and Melissa's going to bring that up on the screen for us.
Did we include Eric before?
I did.
Okay.
I said hello to Eric.
Okay.
All right, so here we go. And you can unmute so that we can have the cacophony of our beautiful voices. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu asok b'divrei Torah. And now we'll just continue doing it in together. Oh, don't take it off yet, Melissa. We have some English.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us to be engaged with words of Torah. Thank you. So now I'm going to ask everyone to mute themselves, please. And we're going to do, and now you can take it off. Thank you. So we are at Parashat Naso, which is the second parsha in the book of Numbers. But we've had, since in the last 2 weeks, since we were last together, we completed our counting of the Omer. And then, of course, on Sunday night and Monday, we celebrated Shavuot. And some folks are still ending their celebration of Shavuot. As many of you know, in Israel, it's a one-day holiday, so they finished already. And most Reform and Reconstructionist Jews do one day of the holiday. But you know, extending holidays is never a bad thing, so that those who want to keep eating wonderful dairy food and continuing the study of these days do so. So what I wanted to do tonight is to share with you. I had the immense pleasure of working with my beloved organization, the Institute for Jewish Spirituality. Last year, they asked me to be part of a project of Torah commentary, where they had a different person do each book of the Torah. And my book was the book of Numbers. And it was very challenging for me because I had never studied it in this much depth. And it was a great pleasure, and it was a lot of work. But as I hope this has been true for each of you in your lives, that you've taken on something that seemed like a mountain of work, and it turned out to be something that gave you much pleasure and much deepening. So I want to share some of what I did a year ago on the introduction to the book of Numbers. And then, as we always do, and some of you may have studied this with Rabbi Maderer in the past, or even this year, or with Rabbi Friedman, we read the book of Ruth. And I just couldn't let this week pass without us having at least some conversation about the book of Ruth. And then we'll conclude with a very small portion of this week's Torah portion. Now, so I'm going to try and do a lot, but I try every time we're together. Usually I try to pack in more than we possibly can in 1 hour, but I hope that's part of our fun, part of the fun that we have of working together. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the book of Numbers because it is a very different kind of book. I also had the good fun to write the chapter on the book of Numbers for this book, which is called The Queer Bible Commentary, which I've mentioned before. I think it was published in England, and I have no idea how they found me, but it was really fun to work on. And Rebecca Alpert actually wrote the chapter on Genesis. Wait, is that the one she did? No. She did one of the others from the first 5. She did Exodus. So I followed her by one. Somebody else did Leviticus in between. Someone named David Tabb Stewart. Maybe some of you know who he is. I don't. And it was funny. One of the things, I never met the people who put the book together, and the primary editor was Darren Guest, D-E-R-Y-N. And at one point I was talking to Rebecca Alpert, who I think many of you know. She's a professor at Temple and the author of the book, Like Bread on the Seder Plate, Lesbians and the Transformation of Jewish Tradition. So Rebecca and I were talking, and I said something about this person, Darren Guest, and we had different ideas about the gender of the person who we had never met. I think she actually did meet them. I can't remember what the gender was. And of course, in our day and age, the gender could have also changed. But when we have names that aren't immediately identifiable, like Sue or Ellen or Eric, who knows? We may change our name, and who knows, at some point, names like, well, there was that song about a boy named Sue, but never mind. All right. I'm going to, so if you'll bear with me, I'm actually going to read you some things that I wrote because I felt like they were still relevant, even though this book was published a number of years ago. So here we are with the book of Numbers. We're pretty familiar with, we've gone through now 3 books, not reading every chapter. We've only been meeting every other week, but you know, Genesis is foundation stories. Exodus is the story of our coming out of Egypt. And Leviticus is indeed a book of laws. So then we enter this book of Numbers. And as you all know, the name of the book in Hebrew is not the word for numbers, but rather Bamidbar, the wilderness. So the name of the book is the wilderness. And indeed, the book really reflects a wilderness sensibility. And any year that we dive into this book about wilderness, we are challenged to think about the inner wilderness of our own beings, of our own hearts. And I think in this year, after the year that we've spent entering into this book of wilderness, unclaimed space, and the challenge that being in any big open space ever brings us, we've all lived through this for the last year of facing the pandemic, not knowing how long our journey through the wilderness will be, not knowing what to expect. And even though things are lightening up, and as Heshi is saying, and as you, Steve, also said, it feels like normal in Florida, we know that things are not back to normal. And those of us who are sitting in Philadelphia today know that we have a very high risk here in Philadelphia. And I live in Graduate Hospital, and I walked into Center City today for a meeting, and you know, a lot of people were wearing masks on the street, and there were those who weren't. And it's like, I didn't wear a mask for the first part of my walk because there weren't too many people. But then when there were more people, I thought, put the mask on, because I was also going to go into building. So I knew I wanted to wear the mask. We are in a time of transition. And I've been doubly vaccinated, so I'm happy to sit in a room with any of you who have had 2 vaccines. But if, my brother actually told me a story that happened to him over the weekend. He was staying in a hotel and the elevator doors opened, and there was a couple who wanted to get in, and my brother's friend said, you can get in as long as, if you're vaccinated, get in. And the guy said, oh, no, I'm not vaccinated, not going to get vaccinated. You guys go up in the elevator. So, my brother was a little stunned by that very vociferous response, but it's like, well, we don't want you in the elevator anyway. But my brother didn't say that, but you know me well enough to know that maybe we come from an opinionated family where we have we're very clear about certain things. So back to the wilderness. All right. What does becoming a people mean? And this question is asked again and again. And here in English, we have the name of the book, Numbers. The book of Numbers counts the people again and again. These 36 chapters are very much notes towards a statement of who counts, both who enumerates and who is counted. This book focuses on individuals and how they enumerate or are considered. And it is also about who counts among and with and for, or against the people Israel. These chapters of counting have an interesting self-consciousness about them as they serve as intermediary chapters of the Israelites' journey narratives, the 5 books of Moses that begins with Genesis and concludes with Deuteronomy. Each story in Numbers that focuses on an individual helps the reader move closer to understanding how individuals move towards the possibility of forming a collective. So we've seen this already a bit in Leviticus, but we see it even more so in the book of Numbers. The collective that is formed is not a spontaneous gathering or a temporary banding together for a single event. Rather, the biblical narrative describes the construction of a corporate identity of individuals bound together by the elusive but potentially permanent bond of faith, a collective that will finally count. How does this happen? How do the people come together? The book of Numbers begins with setting boundaries, determining who is in and who is out, defining what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is unacceptable, considering what actions are tolerable and which actions put one beyond the bounds of the community in formation. These are questions that obviously aren't only for the ancient text, but for us as well. When we create communities, what are our boundaries? These are stories of frightening years, times when the earth swallows up those who challenge the source of light and peace. There are times when the ritual of drinking the dust from a stone floor can either exonerate or convict a woman suspected of adultery. That's actually in this week's portion. We're not going to talk more about it, but I want you to know that this is a very problematic passage that's in our Torah. These in the book of Numbers are times of transition for a population that had become accustomed to a life of slavery, a life predictable in its daily punishments and humiliations, a life that silenced deep hungers and nearly all voices. Now, these former slaves are forced to wander across a harsh and unmarked landscape, stumbling and halting, nearly paralyzed by their fear of the unknown. How do we read these tales that both lift up and flatten the solitary voice that calls for justice, fairness, compassion? Some who speak out are rewarded for their courage. Others are punished by death for having sought a different way. We read these words of rebellion and challenge to authority and are startled by the unexpected voices of talking animals and insects that become some of the most powerful metaphors in the Torah. So this book has all this great stuff in it. Talking animals, as we will see in the coming weeks. And we who read, I'm going to keep reading if that's okay. We who read this text through eyes and life experience that are both ancient and new, bring new questions and new readings to these words. I think we do that all the time. We are reading through our eyes, but the stories are timeless. Too often, we will not know how to read these tales. We may wish to ignore or challenge or simply stop reading them. As I mentioned, sota, which is the ritual of trying to prove a woman that a woman is unfaithful to her husband when it's probably that he was unfaithful. But that's, of course, my feminist reading that we're not going to talk about, but I want you to know it's there. The stories will wait for us until we are wiser, more patient, less anxious for immediate transparency or applicability. Those who have been reading these texts for many years, many decades, know the innate luminescence, the power of these stories to be read anew by each generation. We return to these words because they call to us, as does the sea. Enter here. These words can delight, confound, and tantalize. It is our task to learn to swim. We often use that metaphor. The Talmud is often called a sea, the sea of Talmud, but I think the Torah is also a sea, and our challenge of meeting, as we do every other week, is to learn how to swim. A scholar named Catherine Sackenfeld comments that Numbers is among the most disjointed books of the Bible. One of the challenges of any reader of biblical literature is to learn the techniques of the master cinematographer, knowing when and how to draw back the camera for a wide angle view that takes in a broad and sweeping picture of a landscape, and when to come in close for a tight shot, an intimate look that helps the viewer see the macrocosm of the storm in a drop of rain. The reader of Numbers must often draw the camera back far enough to see the wide expanse of the arid land across which Numbers actors make their way. This journey narrative comes to us in fragments, but the incidents that are reported when taken together help us to see individuals trying to become a people. Through stories from a wide variety of perspectives that can be read as installments in a drama that only takes shape after many readings. My own teacher, Professor James Ackerman, who is now retired from Indiana University, he was my teacher for many years there. Jim Ackerman writes that the editors of the Book of Numbers have arranged a sophisticated collage of diverse materials into a new literary context. And my colleague, Professor Adrienne Levine, who teaches at Hebrew Union College in New York, and we had offices on the same floor there, she's written, in the end, through careful combination and dramatic juxtaposition, these distinct texts create a richly layered but coherent narrative. So, as you know, scholars are always trying to make sense of things that on the surface may look like they're very different. And part of our challenge in reading the Book of Numbers is to take a new look at the stories and see, so what can we learn from them? How can we make our way through the wilderness? A wilderness that all of us experience in our own lives, and then seeing how our ancestors went through the wilderness. So, any questions at this point, or I continued, our recent journeys through this pandemic seem eerily parallel to the wilderness of complaint, confusion, and conflict that we read about in the book of Numbers. Like our ancestors, we press on. So I'm very glad to be thinking about this a year after I wrote these words, that we are actually coming to see some light in the pandemic. None of us thought it would be a full year, but here we are again, looking at this wilderness journey and taking it into our own sensibility. So I'd like to kind of interrupt this as we Jews did. So we read this Parsha last week, and then we didn't really interrupt it. But as we talked about the last time we met, there are particular Torah portions that are read for each holiday. So in the case of this holiday, well, some of you went to shul yesterday, so you can report. What was the Torah that was read yesterday? Or did she read the book of Ruth?
No, Rabbi Mater talked about the giving of the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai.
All right, so that's actually the Torah portion that is read on Shavuot. It's Exodus 19. One of the times that the 10 Commandments are given, Aseret HaDibrot, as some joke, the 10 suggestions, the 10 directions. And so I should listen to what she said. I was at a different shul yesterday where they talked about something else. And then during Shavuot, we also read the book of Ruth. So I wanted to take a look at the book of Ruth because it's such a rich text for us. But before I dive into it, I would love to hear from you any personal memories or experience with the book of Ruth and what it's meant to you. And if you only remember a little part of the story, you can retell part of the story. So anything to share from any of you about Megillat Ruth? We have a small enough group, you can just speak. You don't even have to raise your hand. Rachel.
I was gonna say, I'll just say my wife and I at our wedding, we had, I feel like a lot of people have the, where you go, I will go. And also I just thought it was important because even though it's not like Eros love, it's a deep, passionate love between two women. And I just felt like that was important to have verbalized at our wedding. So
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Others?
Rachel, had either of you converted to Judaism?
No, I am in the process of converting. I'm working with Rabbi Friedman, and my wife is not Jewish. She's actually an atheist, but she is incredibly supportive. And Ruth has also always been something that was a passion book of mine. My mom always jokes and says that it's because it's the shortest. I didn't like reading. But even as a younger kid, I was able to, articulate why it meant something to me. So
And oftentimes it's associated with conversion process as well.
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up, Chip, and Rachel, thank you for sharing. That, of course, Ruth is, Ruth's words Ruth is a Moabite, and her words are considered part of the conversion ceremony very often. And they've also been adopted, as Rachel shares, by lesbian couples. And I'm sure some non-lesbian couples as well, because the words are so powerful. But the fact that they were said that this is part of our sacred text, uttered by one woman to another, makes it a very beautiful text to own when two women come together to spend their lives together. Very beautiful. So here she is, this woman who, the story is really powerful, and it is it is one of the briefest stories in the Torah. Before I jump in any farther, I wonder if there's more that anyone else would like to share about their connection with the book of Ruth, either historically or recently. Okay, so, oh, Heshi, your hand is up, please. No, it's not. Okay. You're muted though. Do you want to say something?
I don't want to say anything. Thank you thank you.
Okay,
No, I'm good.
okay, good. Anyone else right now? All right, so our ancestors chose the book of Ruth as our primary text for this holiday. Why Ruth? Professor Judith Cates writes, this text, by focusing on women, points to an interpretation of the essential content of Torah. Its central characters are literally the poor, the widow, the stranger, those whom Torah calls us to care for, continually reminding us that our care should arise from empathy. As the most vulnerable members of a covenantal community, these women reveal the very heart of the biblical vision of human society and of God. They arouse the community to live up to its own ideals. The book of Ruth embodies in imagination the covenantal community initiated at Sinai. So this story that seems to be a fairly simple story of a widow whose sons tragically die, and she says she's going to go back to her homeland, and the two daughters, daughters-in-law, the wives, also now widows, the young widows, say they'll come with her. And she turns them away. No, go back to your home, go back to your own families. I'm going back to my homeland, and I am empty and sad, and don't come with me. I mean, it's a really incredible story where Ruth says, no, I'm following you. And these beautiful words, where you go, I will go. Where you lie, I will lie. Where you are buried, I will be buried, are perfect for celebrating a commitment, a life commitment, as Rachel and her wife have done. And it's very moving. And yet, I mean, it's a very complicated story because Naomi does not seem to embrace Ruth in the way we would think. Oh, my dear daughter, thank you for following me. Let's go. The story continues, as many of you know, and Ruth ends up being a gleaner. We've spoken before about leaving the corners of the field for the poor, and she's one of the people who goes to collect the ground, the produce, the sheaves on the ground, and she's tipped off that Ruth is. So the owner of the land, whose name is Boaz, is tipped off that he is connected to her because he is Naomi's kinsman. And he ends up marrying her. And so Naomi has a child through Ruth, so to speak. So it's this very amazing story of how do generations continue, about responsibility for continuing generations. And then Ruth becomes, I'm not going to get this right, the great grandmother, an ancestor of King David. So, and King David is, of course, held up to be one of the most important kings in the story of the Jewish people. A problematic leader in some ways. And unfortunately, we're not going to be really talking about him much as we continue to do Parashat HaShavua, but we can talk about the books of Kings another time. So anyway, this is Ruth, and I'd like to share a little more about her. So I want to watch the time as well. We have a little time. Here, I want to lift up a word that's very important in the text, and that word is chesed. Many of you have heard this word. I've got some scholars in the room. What does the word chesed in Hebrew mean? Does anyone think of any meanings that you're familiar with? Chet, samech, hey, daled. Chet, samech, daled, chesed.
Kind-
Oh,
okay.
please, Ellen.
Oh, I was going to say kindness, mercy, those qualities, those loving qualities.
Yes, loving kindness, mercy, sometimes compassion. So this word comes over and over in the book of Ruth. So what is chesed? So one of the dictionaries that scholars and rabbis often use, called Brown Driver Briggs or the BDB, it's defined as goodness, kindness. The verb, Ellen, is here to be good or kind or pious. The word appears 3 times in the book of Ruth. Naomi entreats her daughters-in-law to return to their mother's home, and she asks God to deal kindly with them. Imachem chesed, as you have dealt with the dead and with me, she says. Later, Naomi speaks of God's chesed to the living and to the dead, when she discovers that her kinsman, Boaz, is the owner of the field where Ruth has been gleaning. And finally, Boaz blesses Ruth in appreciation for her kindness, chasdech, and Rabbi Zera in the Talmud says, this quality may be more important to the health and well-being, and perhaps even to the future of the Jewish people, than any discourse on purity or impurity, any regulation or instruction. So the scroll doesn't talk about purity and impurity, but it was written to teach us about chesed, about deeds of loving kindness. Some of you know of the writer Cynthia Ozick. She recently wrote a review of the now discredited new book about Saul Bellow, not Saul Bellow. Oh, about Philip Roth. So she's a major American writer of the 21st century, Cynthia Ozick. And here's what she writes about the book of Ruth. Only 85 verses tell Ruth and Naomi's story. So Rachel already knew. You didn't maybe know it was 85, but you knew it was short. To talk of it takes much longer. Not that the greatest stories are the shortest, not at all, but a short story has a stalk or a shoot through which its life rushes and out of which the flowery head erupts. The book of Ruth, wherein goodness grows out of goodness, and the extraordinary is found here and here and here. The book of Ruth is sown in destruction, bereavement, barrenness, death, loss, displacement, destitution. What can sprout such ash? Out of this stalk, mercy and redemption unfold. So here, the idea that out of the brokenness, these 3 widows, 2 widows traveling together to find redemption. And it is a story of redemption. And it's a story, I mean, it's so interesting that here on a day devoted to the study of Torah, we're really looking at kindness as being, that's really the flower that Cynthia Ozick is talking about with this beautiful short story that I love the fact, Rachel, that you said you you've liked it your whole life. So maybe your Hebrew name will incorporate Ruth, even as you have a name that's already a beautiful Hebrew name. So one of the things, I mean, we could also spend more time talking about the power and the beauty and the courage of Jews by choice, of those who choose Judaism at any time in life. And that here is this story that we read on Shavuot, on the day of getting the Torah, where really there is the sense that Torah is for everyone. It's not just for Jews. The Torah is given to the world. And I think part of our job as Jews is to open the books, to make them more visible, to share these stories, and to keep delving and diving into them to find things we didn't see before. That's what I was trying to say in the beginning about the book of Numbers. You know, what's in there and how can it be relevant to our lives? Chip, is your hand up, or are you just, that's the way your hand is? Okay. I'm happy to hear from you as I talk. I don't want to be monopolizing this. Here. I want to read a little more about Ruth here. We Jews who should know the heart of the stranger return to this text every year to be reminded that chesed is as important as law. Chesed is the essence and articulation of real justice. This is coming back to us again and again. I mean, today is voting day. I hope everybody voted. And we voted for judges. And we are more aware than ever of the importance of putting people who really care about the law and who want to deliver the law fairly into positions of power. So on this day, I hadn't really thought of it, but here we're reading the book of Ruth, but we're also thinking about Ruth of our generation, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was truly a lawyer's lawyer. She really lived justice, justice shall you pursue. So in our story, Naomi and Ruth are widows, empty, bereft, without husbands in a patriarchal culture. Naomi, used to plenty, finds herself without food and shelter. She does not seem to recognize the power of Ruth's presence with her. In spite of Ruth's powerful words of commitment, words so often used in LGBT marriages and commitment ceremonies, that one writer I read referred to them as the traditional Jewish wedding vow. So maybe it's becoming traditional. Naomi does not respond, as I mentioned before. She doesn't say anything when Ruth says this. The two women walk in silence to Bethlehem. And when upon arrival, Naomi does not speak. When Naomi does speak, she speaks only of her own sorrow, not even acknowledging Ruth's presence. How often does our own pain, our own grief, our own loss blind us to the loving presence of another, even as they reach towards us with words or gestures or simple presence, with chesed? So to me, this was, thinking about Naomi's inability to see Ruth through her own grief. But then she does embrace her later. But this is, as we turn, as the Talmud tells us, turn it, for all is in it. There's so much in each of these stories that each time I go back and reread them, I see new things that I didn't see before, and I hope you will too. So other thoughts about the Book of Ruth that you've had, or even the name? What is the name? Has the name meant anything to you in your lives? A mother, a grandmother, a child, a grandchild? Because of course, names go in and out of fashion. We could all spend quite a bit of time talking about our own names, chosen and given. It's one of the wonderful things about becoming a Jew by choice. You get to choose a name.
My mother was Ruth.
Ah,
Thank you for asking that.
oh. So, thank you. What was her whole name, Ellen?
She did not have a middle name, and she always wondered why she didn't have a middle name. So it was just Ruth, and her maiden name was Rosen. So it's Ruth Rosen.
Mm,
And she would go by Ruthie.
ah.
Yeah.
Anyone else with a Ruth in your family? So your mother is with
Yeah.
us tonight. Yes, Steve.
Yes, an aunt, my father's older sister, was Ruth. Rivka, everybody used Rivka. And she had no middle name either.
Huh. Thank you.
My Aunt Ruth, who really wasn't an aunt by blood, but she was my the wife of my father's best friend, and their daughter actually was named after my mom. And Aunt Ruth died last week, so at the age of
Oh.
93. So it's appropriate.
Yeah. Wow. Sorry for your loss. Yeah.
I had an Aunt Ruth also. And also growing up, I think there were 3 Ruths in my neighborhood in Bayonne.
Wow. I also had more than one Aunt Ruth, but I also love what Chip said. And I think it's true in many, many cultures where we call people who may not be related aunt and uncle or some equivalent thereof, because it's an extended family and there's a sense of connection. Even when it's not, I don't want to say even when it's not, when there is this best friend. So of course, they become aunt and uncle. Anyone else want to share something about Ruth, memories of Ruth? Or Ruthie? Or Ruth Ann or Ruth Ellen, things, names that were put together in Jewish families. So this week's portion in our last 12 minutes is Parashat Naso. And it's a complicated one in this book of wandering. This portion that I mentioned has the Sotah, S-O-T-A-H ritual in it, that we could have spent more than 1 hour on. I wanted to take a look when I looked at this portion of women. So a woman who seems to not have any agency. And I wanted to see about women who have agency in the tradition. One of the texts that I sent to Melissa to share with you, and maybe just put this up for now, the text of the Dropbox. That's what I'm going to ask for. So the texts that I wrote last year are all available in a Dropbox. So if you're interested, I put together a document, which maybe you can do a screenshot of for yourself. That would be, I can also send it to you if you can't do the screenshot, because it's now in a PDF form. So these are the 10 essays that I wrote. I think it's 10, 3, 6, 8. The 8 essays that I wrote for the Institute of Jewish Spirituality. And you can see, although it somehow got mashed, the first one is Bamidbar, the second one is Naso, the third one, it says B percentage 27, it's Baha'alotecha. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And the next one is Bishalach. See that it says Bishalach. The next one after that is Korach. The next one after that is a double of Hukat and Balak. The penultimate one is Pinchas. And the last one was another double of Matot Maseh. So just, these are the essays I wrote. If you're interested, they are available through Dropbox. Melissa very kindly went and checked them because I couldn't tell. I knew it would open for me, but I didn't know if it would open for someone else, and it opened up for Melissa. So if you can't take a screenshot of this, you'll write in the chat and I'll send you the PDF so that you can look these up. So you can take that down now. And what I want to conclude with is, the next one that Melissa will put up for us. So this is part of this portion, and it's a prayer that you all know. It's the priestly blessing, and it is in this portion. It is, and here's Chip remembering Star Wars. And yes, may we all, yes. Here it is. It's, Melissa, you're gonna put up that piece
I
for me.
don't think I have that actually.
Oh, it didn't come? Okay, so let's see if I can quick grab it and put it up. All right. I thought I sent it to you, but I guess I didn't. So let's see how, oh, first of all, can I share my screen?
I just made you a co-host, so
Okay,
you should be good to go.
Great. Okay, good. Okay, so it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. Let's get it to be this. Thank you for your patience, everyone, after Melissa has been so great and it turns out I didn't send it to her. Okie dokie. All right, it's not that. I'm gonna close this. You're just going to have to put up with me for just a minute while I find it. Thank you for your patience. Okay.
Stuck in the chat if it's easier.
Oh, let's see. Hold on. Okay.
Of course, this is not from a Hebrew book, but you can see it says, doesn't say "and I bless you," but
All right, let's, oh, I see. No, I want this here. And, oh, so priestly blessing. Okay. Thank you guys for waiting, and share screen and, oh, where did it go? If it's on my desktop, where should I put it, Melissa, so they can see it?
If it's on your desktop, you want to share your entire screen, and then it should open. You can choose that specific document. When you go to share, it should
Okay.
have that as an option.
Okay.
Do you see it?
All right, share screen. Got it.
Great.
Well, desktop. Oh, now you can see my whole desktop, and here it comes. Got it. Right?
Great.
Yes. So, so this is the priestly blessing, and it's from this parsha, and all right. I want us to see all of it, and I realize we've got 6 minutes, but you've heard this said and sung many times because we end the service with it. And I'm only sorry that I didn't bring a musical version, and I'm not going to sing it for you. If there's any singers online here, that would be lovely, but I don't want to put anyone on the spot. But RS particularly has a wonderful tradition of having a rabbi and a cantor or cantorial soloist singing this together, and you're very familiar with it. So what I wanted to do was for us to take a look at it in its context in the Torah. So the first line, as you see, is Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. The Holy One spoke with Moses and said, speak to Aaron and his sons, thus shall you bless the people of Israel. So first of all, it's a bit of a surprise. It's Daber el Aharon ve'el banav. Usually God is speaking to Moses. So here, God is speaking to Aaron and saying, and here we are way past the golden calf. We had that in the book of Exodus. And so here, this Aaron, who hasn't always been in God's good graces, is the one who's going to bless the people. So here, then, the beautiful blessing comes. Yes, there we go. So here it is. Oops, and that's my typo. It should be may God bless you. So it's these 3 lines that you're very familiar with. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yisem lecha shalom. So a couple of things to point out. First of all, it's written in the masculine singular. So even though it says, thus shall you bless the people of Israel, ko tivarchu et bnei Yisrael, that's definitely plural. It's in the singular. So those of you who have studied Hebrew know that there are clear differences, but this is still said, this is still written, is may you be blessed, singular, masculine singular. Now we use it as a masculine and feminine plural all the time. And we don't change it when we're blessing a woman. Some of us do, but traditionally it hasn't been changed, but it could. So, and I have provided 2 different translations. So the first is pretty straightforward. Yivarechacha is may God bless you. Yivarechacha Adonai. So you see the second word and you know that we read, here I can use this, from right to left here. So this 4-letter tetragrammaton is how we write God's name. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. So many of you are familiar with Shamor v'Zachor. Shamor v'Zachor is what we do with Shabbat. We remember it and we observe it. We pay attention to it. We protect it. We watch over it. All right. So lishmor. So vishmarecha. So may God bless you and may God watch over you. So that's the first one. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chunecha. And v'chunecha. So some of you have studied Hebrew, you know when that little dot is in there in any letter, it's going to change it. If it were here, it would be a bi instead of a vi. That's another lesson. And I hope some of you have looked kindly on your Hebrew studies, and those for whom it's in the future, may it be a good experience. So here, this translation is the one that I got on Sefaria. May God deal kindly and graciously with you. Well, that reflects the chesed that we just studied about in the book of Ruth, but here it really is about God's face. The word panim means face. Another story, it's a plural word. Do we have many faces? It says that there are 70 faces of Torah, but here Ya'er means may there be shining. May God's face shine. So it's in a different order than we do in English. So here's God's face shine on you. And then here we have this wonderful word, chen. Chen means grace. We don't usually talk about grace in Judaism, but it's a very important word. And the name Hannah or Hanan, those are both names that come from the word grace. Chen, vihu necha. See the chet and the nun. Here, Yisa, that is the word to lift up. Yisa Adonai, may God, and then here again, face. May God's face be lifted up to you. Vayisem lecha shalom, and give you shalom, shlemut, wholeness, peace. And then the last line here, thus they shall link my name with the people of Israel, and I will bless them. We don't usually read that line. We just look at the 3 lines of blessing. But before we conclude, I just wonder if anyone wants to say anything about this blessing and the role that this blessing has played in their lives. Oh, you beautiful folks from RS, where it's been a very important blessing in the history of the congregation.
You know, I will always remember there was a soloist in the choir who would always sing this, and she had a very, very high voice.
Mm.
And, you know, it was, you know, at the end of the service, and here we are, have this beautiful, beautiful, really high notes that were sung with this. And it just is a memory that I will never forget. And I remember someone in the children's choir saying, can't we sing that? And it's like, there's no way we could have ever done it justice.
Well, you may be thinking of Jody Kidwell.
No, well before
someone
Jody.
else. When
This is
you were a
Motorshell
child.
to urban 1960s.
Oh, when you were a child.
1970, 1960s, early 70s.
Oh, all right. But there are some beautiful ways to sing it. So we'll have to, actually, I heard a beautiful version the other day. Now I'm thinking, and I should have brought it. But I think we'll just say the words to conclude. Anyone else want to have a
I
memory?
stuck a beautiful version, not RS's version, but I stuck it in the chat. And I encourage you to listen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chip. Okay, Steve, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I just saw that you were unmuted. So it's 7:01, but before we close, I just want to offer this blessing. It's part of the joy for me of having the opportunity to study with each of you. And not that I have any power to bless, but I have this opportunity to offer this blessing to you. So all of you, just take this in. I am offering this blessing as your teacher today. And I'm honored to be able to look at all of your faces and to hold you in this space. I'm going to say it in its traditional masculine singular, except for the last word, which will be plural. Or the last phrase. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'kuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yisim lechem. Shalom. May God bless each of you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May God's face be lifted up to you as your faces are lifted up to Torah in this very moment. And may you go forth into this week and all the weeks to come in peace. Amen. Kenny Hiratzon.